Hello, children. Have you heard about this organization called the United Nations? The United Nations is an international organization and it was established to ensure peace and security at the international level. The League of Nations was established after the First World War and the United Nations was established after the Second World War. The League of Nations did not succeed to establish world peace. After the use of the nuclear weapons in the Second World War, the idea took root that such destructive wars should be stopped and that it is the collective responsibility of all nations to do so. Establishment of the United Nations. The Atlantic Treaty was signed between Prime Minister of England, Sir Winston Churchill, and American President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was signed on 14th August 1941. A decision was taken to set up a permanent mechanism to establish international security after the Second World War ended. Discussions on this decision happened in two conferences in the year 1944 and 1945, and a draft of the treaty to establish an international organization was prepared. At San Francisco in America, representatives of 50 countries drafted or created the Charter of the United Nations. The Charter was signed on 24th October 1945 and the United Nations was established. Objectives of the United Nations. Today, there are 193 members of this organization. The United Nations takes up all necessary measures for establishing international peace. Some of its objectives are to establish friendly relations among nations, to enhance international security by solving international disputes, to safeguard and foster human rights and freedom. Another aim was enhancing economic cooperation at the international level. Now, all member countries of United Nations have to follow some rules. They have to respect the diplomatic privileges of sovereign nations, not to attack other countries, and they have to follow international laws and treaties. Principles. All member nations have equal or same status. They are not discriminated based on geographical size, economic or military power. All member nations respect the freedom and geographical unity of other member nations. All member nations should solve their international disputes and mutual differences by peaceful means. The United Nations has 6 main organs. The first one is General Assembly. Now, all member countries are members of the General Assembly as well. The position and status of all the countries is same. The General Assembly meets from September to December, and during these sessions, they discuss on issues like environment, disarmament, etc. Now, this organ can only pass resolutions. It does not make laws. The importance of the General Assembly is in being a platform for the representatives of member nations to come together, discuss, and make policy decisions on issues of global importance. Let us look at the functions of General Assembly. First, to elect the non-permanent members of the Security Council. Second, to choose the United Nations Secretary General. and the judges of the International Court of Justice in consultation with the Security Council. The third one is to pass the annual budget of the United Nations. Now, children, the headquarters of the United Nations are at New York. English, French, Russian, Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic are the official languages of the United Nations. Now, let us look at the next organ of the United Nations, which is Security Council. There are 15 members in the Security Council. 5 are permanent members, and these permanent members are Russia, America, England, France, and China. The 10 other members are non-permanent members. These non-permanent members are chosen every 2 years by the General Assembly. For any decision to be taken, the assent or the agreement of all 5 permanent members and 4 non-permanent members is necessary. Now, the permanent members have something called the veto power. If even one of the 5 permanent members uses his veto, that is, gives a negative vote, the decision cannot be taken. Let us look at the functions of the Security Council. The first and the main is to maintain international peace and security. To maintain peace, the Security Council may suggest measures like end or resolve conflict and make efforts to establish peace, or impose economic sanctions, or take a decision of military action against the aggressor nation. The second one is to prepare policies for arms control. Third, to play a joint role with the General Assembly in the appointment of the judges of the International Court of Justice and also the appointment of the Secretary General of the United Nations. India is making efforts to get the permanent membership of the Security Council. The next organ is Economic and Social Council. Now, this organ has 54 members, and its main objective is to coordinate the economic and social policies of the United Nations. The member nations or the members of this organ are selected by the General Assembly. Each member has a tenure or holds office of 3 years, and each year 1/3 of the members are newly chosen. Decisions are taken by majority vote in this organ. Functions: start discussions at global level on issues like poverty, unemployment, economic and social inequality, and suggest policies to manage these problems. Discuss issues like women's rights, human rights, fundamental freedom, global trade, health-related issues, and make decisions on them. They also make efforts to establish cultural and educational cooperation at the international level. Coordinate the functioning of the different organizations working in association with the United Nations is also one of its functions. The next is Secretariat. The next organ is Secretariat. The responsibility of carrying out the administrative task of the United Nations is with this organ. The chief of this Secretariat is the Secretary General, who is selected by the General Assembly and the Security Council. His tenure, or he holds office for 5 years. Functions: to call international conferences on global problems like climate change, human rights, disarmament, etc. To organize meetings of the General Assembly and Security Council. To put together the required information. To supply information to the media. The next is International Court of Justice. International Court of Justice is the judicial branch of the United Nations, and it is located at The Hague in the Netherlands. There are 15 judges in the International Court of Justice. They are selected by the General Assembly and the Security Council, and every judge has tenure of 9 years. The functions are to settle the disputes between 2 or more member nations of the United Nations, to interpret international law authentically, to advise the various organs or subsidiary bodies of the United Nations about legal issues. International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court is an intergovernmental organization and an international tribunal. The International Criminal Court has the jurisdiction to prosecute individuals for international crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes that are of concern to the international community. The next organ is Trusteeship Council. After Second World War, the territories that were undeveloped were placed under the responsibility of the developed nations. Now, the developed nations were supposed to help bring about the development of these territories, and once they attained independence from their colonies, help establish democracy. The work of the Trusteeship Council is over as there are no trust territories left. Now, other than these organs, there are other affiliated organs of United Nations. For example, the UNICEF. It is an affiliated organization of the United Nations. It works towards making nutritious food and health care available to children. Several workshops were organized in India to find out measures to overcome malnutrition among babies and children. The next affiliated organ that we will see is UNESCO. It works towards peace and security in the world by promoting cooperation between member countries in the fields of education, science, and culture. Millennium Development Goals. Now, these goals were decided in the year 2000. To eliminate poverty and hunger, to make facilities of primary education, to bring about women's empowerment, reduce infant mortality rate, to take special care of the health of pregnant women, to fight diseases like AIDS, malaria, etc., to protect the environment and increase the cooperation between developed and developing countries. These were some of the important goals. A time period has been decided to achieve these goals. United Nations and preservation of peace. The United Nations Charter lays down the ways and means to be used to settle international conflict peacefully. It includes appointing an intermediary. Now, who is this? It is a person who acts as a link between countries to bring about an agreement, which is acceptable to the nations involved in the conflict. Use the legal procedure, appoint an arbitrator. Who is an arbitrator? It is an independent person or body who is officially appointed to settle disputes. It also provides recourse to military means to ensure that conflict does not occur again. The function of securing peace of the United Nations has acquired a lot of importance, as human security is endangered by terrorism, racist and religious conflict. The United Nations makes efforts to ensure that violence does not erupt in strife-torn areas and normalcy is restored as soon as possible. When we say normalcy, we are talking about things like starting schools, creating awareness about human rights, make social, economic, political facilities available, conduct elections, etc. Now let us look at United Nations peacekeeping force. Now, the peacekeeping activity of the United Nations involves creating situations favorable for bringing about permanent peace in strife-torn areas. The peacekeeping forces help these areas to progress towards peace. The United Nations may take other additional activities to peacekeeping activities, like prevention of conflict and mediation, actually establish peace, implement the measures of protecting peace, and peace building. The United Nations and India. India has been an active participant in the establishment of the United Nations and in the work that United Nations does. India has participated in bringing issues like decolonization, disarmament, racial segregation on the United Nations platform. In 1946, India was the first country to raise the question of racism in the United Nations. India has always led the discussions about the problems of undeveloped and developing countries. India has also contributed troops to the peacekeeping forces. India has also sent an all-women peacekeeping force. India has made serious efforts to solve international conflict by peaceful means. Children, with this we complete explanation for this lesson. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and take care.